guess I don't know my own strength.
Anyone who's watched Spy X Family knows that your forger is strong. Our queen is an assassin and one of the best at that. Her career choice has caused her to gain some superhuman strength and speed over the years in order to become the powerhouse killer we see in this sweet and wholesome show. Spy X Family frequently will over-exaggerate situations for entertainment value, like when Anya winds up her super dodgeball throw, but one thing is very clear: your strength is not exaggerated. While it's mainly used for laughs throughout the anime, it's undeniable that many of her feats of strength actually happen. Today, I wanted to look at some of her most insane moments and break them down in order to understand just how superhuman your forger is. The three factors I want to look at are her speed, her strength, and her durability. I picked out some scenes that represent each of these attributes. To start, I want to talk about Yor's speed. The example we're going to look at for Yor's speed takes place during Season 2. For the majority of Season 1, Yor is kind of just a side character. She shows up in almost every episode, but the focus is almost always on Lloyd or Anya. This always made me a little bit sad because Yor is my favorite character in Spy X Family, and I wanted some episodes more focused around her. In Season 2, we finally get this. There is a multi-episode arc focused around Yor and her assassin work, and it also dives into what she wants with her own life. I enjoyed this arc, and it's filled with many superhuman moments we could talk about, and we will talk about a few of those moments throughout the video. But when it comes to her speed, there is one clear moment in this arc that shows off her truly superhuman skills. Yor's mission is to protect a mother and her child while they're on a cruise ship. Once the cruise is a decent way out to sea, the mother and child will then get on a different ship in order to escape to a different country where they're safe from assassins. Yor's protection is essential because the group gets attacked by assassin after assassin during their days at sea. When the time comes to escape the ship, the group decides to move onto the roof for a quieter escape. But, of course, there's a sniper perched high above them ready to take out the target. The sniper is aiming for the mother and her child, but his shot fails to connect due to Yor's extremely fast reflexes. So how fast would Yor need to move in order to protect the pair from the sniper's bullet?
I don't fucking know, that's why I'm watching your goddamn video!
The first thing I need to point out is that Yor moves after the bullet is fired from the sniper. Yor doesn't spot the sniper and then protect the pair, but rather, she reflexively protects them after the gun is fired. We don't get to see her react in real time to the shot, but it's still pretty clear that she doesn't react until the bullet has left the barrel. With that in mind, we have three different variables we need to figure out in order to understand how fast Yor is reacting in this moment. The first variable is the speed of the bullet. Any bullet is fast, but there's a very big difference depending on the type of gun being used and the type of ammunition being used as well. From my research, bullets fired from high-powered rifles have a speed of anywhere from 2,500 feet per second all the way up to 3,500 feet per second. For our math, we're just gonna go with the middle of that range. 3,000 feet per second definitely sounds fast, but it's kind of hard to visualize that. For a more understandable point of reference, 3,000 feet per second is over 2,000 miles an hour, or over 3,300 kilometers an hour. The second variable we need to figure out is how far away the sniper is from the group. Pixel measurements aren't going to work here, so we're going to have to go with averages again for this part of the equation. According to USA River Cruises, the average ocean liner cruise ship is around 1,000 feet long. Yor isn't at the very front of the ship, and the shooter isn't at the very back of the ship, so in all likelihood, the distance between the two is going to be less than what we're going to use. We can't figure out their exact distance apart, so we're going to be generous and go with the full 1,000 feet for their distance. As we already established, the bullet is moving at 3,000 feet per second, so in the best case scenario, Yor only has a third of a second to react. The final factor we need to know is how far apart Yor is from the mother and child. Right before the sniper shoots, we get this shot of the group walking. The group is pretty far away and the shot is also angled, but all of the characters are on the same visual plane, so pixel measurements will give us at least a decent idea of their distance apart here. I used Yor and her height as the reference point here and ran the measurements. The outcome is that Yor is 2.5 feet in front of the mother and child. Now that we have all the variables, we can understand how fast Yor is moving in order to protect the would-be victims. Well, kind of. I want to talk about one more detail here. Sniper bullets move faster than the speed of sound, so Yor could not be reacting to the sound of the gunshot here. The bullet would hit the targets before the sound reached the group. This sort of implies that not only does Yor have superhuman speeds, but she also has some superhuman perception. Originally, I wanted to also talk about this moment from season 1 where Yor saves a flower pot, but unfortunately the math and everything just wasn't working out. I tried for hours to figure this one out, but I wasn't able to. Mainly, there wasn't good enough frames or reference points to pull consistent numbers from. The reason I bring up this scene is for 2 reasons. First, time slows down when Yor notices the falling pot.
Yor, the grinder, save the Keef!
While this is more than likely just animation flair, I like to think that Yor perceives time differently, kind of like a speedster does.
You can't see things how I do. My perception is just as fast as I am. The briefest conversation with anyone seems like hours to me. It's agony.
This is just some fun headcanon I have, because there's no real way to measure the way that she perceives the world. The much more important reason I bring this up is to point out that Yor doesn't notice the falling pot until it's at her head height. This is a strong indication that while Yor's perception is pretty high up there is a hard limit on what she can perceive. The fact that she doesn't notice the flower pot until it's nearly smashed into the ground indicates to me that she wouldn't have noticed the sniper's bullet the moment it left the barrel. Yor clearly reacts to the bullet, but there's no way to tell at what point along the bullet's trajectory that she notices and reacts. With that being said, I think it's fairly likely that she doesn't notice the bullet until it's pretty close to the group. The flower pot I mentioned before is about 2/3 of the way through its fall before Yor notices it, but once she does notice it, she moves extremely fast. So fast that we the viewers can't even see her moving in this moment. With all of that evidence in mind, I think it's pretty reasonable to assume that the bullet was 2/3 of the way through its flight before Yor's perception is able to pick it up. This means that Yor only has about 1/10 of a second to react to the incoming bullet. Math time. Yor needs to move 2.5 feet in under 1/10 of a second in order to save the mother and child. The math is super easy. We just need to divide the distance traveled by the time it takes her to do so. This gives us a speed of 25 feet per second, or just over 17 miles an hour. That might not seem so fast until you remember that she starts at 0 miles per hour, and all of this takes place in under 1/10 of a second. Also, according to Statistia, I still don't know how to pronounce that site's name, the average sustained speed for a female Olympic runner on the 400-meter race is 18 miles per hour. This means that Yor is hitting Olympic level speeds in under 1/10 of a second in order to save her charges. Again, while impressive, this doesn't seem that crazy. I think a better metric to show off just how insane this feat is by showing off her acceleration. I won't go over the math, but Yor is accelerating at a rate of 250 feet per second squared. What this means is that if Yor maintained her acceleration for just 1 second, she would be moving at a rate of 170 miles per hour. If you remember from my Toji Fushiguro video, this is a very similar speed to what Toji would be running at in order to run on the water like he does. Yor is smaller and lighter than Toji Fushiguro, and so what this moment tells us is that if she wanted to, Yor could probably run on water. That moment we discussed only shows off Yor's speed and perception, so let's move on to her superhuman strength. One scene that shows off Yor's strength takes place in the same arc where she dodges the sniper's bullet. In fact, it takes place at the end of the same episode. Yor is facing down a man with a katana and she quite literally snaps the man's blade with her bare hands. Well, she has gloves on, but you get what I mean. I did some digging on the type of steel used to create katana blades, and there are a few different types. The traditional Japanese method of creating katanas uses a type of steel known as tamahage steel. I probably mispronounced that. Other types of steel used to create katanas are Damascus steel and many different types of composite steels. We can't exactly tell what steel is used in the assassin's blade, so for the sake of our math and calculations, I'm going to use A2 steel. Wikipedia states that outside of Japan, A2 is a common type of steel used in creating katanas used in martial arts. I did want to use the traditional steel for this, but sadly I wasn't able to find a clear reference for the metal's shear strength. I also know Wikipedia isn't the best source, but I'm inclined to trust it on this detail because many of the non-Wikipedia sources I looked at stated that steel used in katana blades had around 0.7 to 1.5% carbon in the blades, and A2 steel has a carbon content of 1%. It fits right in that range, and so I'm comfortable using this type of steel for our reference point. Most importantly though, I was able to find the shear strength for A2 steel. It's at this point in the video where I bring up the fact that I am not a physicist and just a guy who likes math and science doing his best to figure out these moments. If I've gotten any details wrong or misunderstood any of the physics concepts, please let me know in the comments, but Also, be nice. This is only my second video like this, so I've definitely got a lot to learn down the road. I did my very best to make sure I'm presenting accurate information in this video, but I'm also human. That all being said, I do plan to make more videos like this in the future, and so if you're enjoying this one, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. My next How Superhuman video will be all about Luffy and his feats of strength featured in the East Blue Saga.
Back to the breakdown.
Shear strength is the amount of force an object can take before it shears, or in other words, its breaking point. I found the properties list for A2 steel on onlinemetals.com, and according to that list, A2 steel has a shear strength of 65 KSI.
In New York.
Concrete jungle where dreams are made of.
KSI isn't the YouTuber, but rather it stands for kilopounds per square inch. This means that Yor would need to be exerting around 65,000 pounds of force per square inch on the blade in order to snap it like she does. The average width of a katana blade near the end of it is about an inch, and so Yor is exerting around 65,000 pounds of force in this instance. If you're anything like me, that number probably doesn't really mean anything to you. So let's take that number and put it in an easier to understand perspective. I went ahead and converted the pounds of force into newtons in order to make it easier on myself when finding a nice comparison. 65,000 pounds of force converts to 289,000 newtons of force. Using that number, I plopped it into a calculator and did some algebra in order to find a nice comparison. To demonstrate just how much force Yor is exerting, I decided to use the How Ridiculous Boys as an example. How Ridiculous is a YouTube channel where they drop heavy shit from a tower and break stuff. Good times. The tower they drop stuff from is 45 meters tall, and if they wanted to break a katana's blade just like Yor does, they would need to drop a 20-pound dumbbell from the top of that tower onto a katana's blade. Now, anyone familiar with the How Ridiculous Boys knows that they drop much heavier shit from a tower than a 20-pound dumbbell. On the surface, 20 pounds isn't a lot when compared to things like their 660-pound Hulk fist, but I want you to visualize yourself at the bottom of the tower with a 20-pound dumbbell hurtling at your face. The force that you'd feel when that dumbbell smashes through your head is the same amount of force that Yor is generating here with her bare hands. She is undoubtedly very strong. For the majority of the video, I've tried to keep things reasonable. Yor is very clearly superhuman, but I wanted to avoid over-exaggerating things. I've been mainly using averages, and I've done my very best to reasonably interpret the events happening on screen. But what would things look like if we just took it all at face value? What kind of results could we get if we just took the most extreme interpretation of the events happening on screen? To figure this out, I'm gonna pass things off to my friend, that anime theorist, Jordan. He's going to talk about a scene that I think all of you watching were expecting this video to discuss: the tennis match.
Thanks for having me. And yes, I'll be discussing Yor's simple tennis game against Lloyd's coworker, Fiona Frost. Also known as Nightfall, Fiona is a fellow spy who works alongside Lloyd at Wise. In this instance, Fiona and Lloyd were put on a mission requiring them to enter and win a billionaire-funded underground tennis tournament. Wow, that's a mouthful. Anyhow, after successfully completing their mission in what could only be described as an entire other video worth of feats, Fiona finally meets Yor after dropping off Lloyd. After witnessing Yor's charm firsthand, Fiona enters into a fit of jealous rage, as she wants old Lloydy boy all to herself. So, the freshly crowned underground tennis champ does the only reasonable thing to assert her dominance, and asks Yor to play in a quick tennis match. Now, I would love to say that we'll be addressing how Yor absolutely shredded that tennis ball. Unfortunately, neither I nor Jared had any clue where to even start with those calculations without using piano wire for tennis racket strings. Now, Yor's second attempt to hit the ball was not only humanly impossible, but it may be beyond superhuman. To see how superhuman her tennis shot really is, we need to find out how fast the ball was traveling. We can use many different references to see how fast the ball was moving, from the concrete ripping up to a dent made in the tree. Let's start on the low end with the most upfront information. Fiona claimed that as the ball was approaching her, that it had to be moving at least Mach 1. Given the previous issue with the tennis rackets ignoring physics, we're going to ignore the tennis racket's durability. Well, let's jump into it. What does Mach 1 even mean? According to a little astrotech company called NASA, the measurement of Mach is the ratio of speed of the aircraft to the speed of sound. If the tennis ball is flying less than Mach 1, it's going subsonic. If it's flying over Mach 1, it's going supersonic. And if the tennis ball is just right sitting at Mach 1, it's transonic, or exactly the speed of sound, which is 767 miles per hour. Now, we said that this was on the low end of the potential speed your shot could achieve. What else could we use to infer the speed of the ball? If we take a closer look at the tennis ball as it approaches Fiona, we can see the hue of the ball shifts from a standard green to a light blue. When an object visibly changes color when it's moving, we refer to the effect as the Doppler effect. What? I thought the Doppler effect was when a loud object gets closer and has a notably higher frequency. While you are correct, the Doppler effect is actually defined as the change in a frequency of a wave when the observer is moving relative to the source of the wave. You want to know what else behaves like a wave? Light. We commonly measure this phenomenon in stars to chart the expansion of the universe. If a star moves closer to Earth, we'll see a star's wavelength shift slightly blue, and if it moves away, it'll shift slightly red. But to go from bright green to blue is ridiculous and practically unheard of. The visible light spectrum ranges between 400 and 700 nanometers. A 1% change in color, or 3 nanometers, must have a minimum speed of 1,000 kilometers per hour. And if the ball shifts from a yellow of 603 nanometers to a blue of 478 nanometers, we are talking some serious speed. So to see how fast the ball was traveling, we can use the ever so popular non-relativistic Doppler shift formula, but I'm sure you've heard of it. We'll only need a little bit more information to complete this equation. Specifically, we'll need to use the speed of light, or what will be represented as c, and the receiver's velocity, which in this case will be 0, as Fiona is practically petrified. Additionally, we're going to quickly convert our previous values for yellow and blue to terahertz, with our yellow equal to 497 terahertz and our blue is 627 terahertz. After plugging all that into our formula, we get a tennis ball flying at 22.8% of the speed of light, and for all you math lovers out there, is just a tad over Mach 1. But for real, 22.8% the speed of light is approximately 68.4 million meters per second, or 152 million miles per hour. Now what I'm really asking is, how did they both get this superhuman? Yes, Yor hit the ball, but Fiona almost returned it. But what I really want to know is, where do I get one of those indestructible rackets?
Thank you, Jordan. If you've been enjoying this video, go check out his channel. We collabed on another SpyX family video on his channel, which you can go watch after you finish this one. It's a video about Operation Strix and how it might secretly be an operation meant to help Lloyd retire. It's a pretty interesting theory that you're not going to want to miss. I'll have a link to Jordan's channel and the video we collaborated on in the description of this video. Finally, the last thing we need to discuss is Yor's durability. There are definitely less examples of this aspect of her superhumanness, but the one example that we have does show off her durability pretty well. In episode 36, Becky pretends to be drunk in order to flirt with Lloyd. Yor, being the queen that she is, she misunderstands that Becky is pretending and instead thinks that she accidentally served a 6-year-old alcohol. Yor's superhuman speed kicks in and she starts to sprint Becky to the hospital. While doing so, she fails to notice an oncoming car until it's too late. So, Yor throws a child a few stories into the air and then she gets nailed by the car. She rolls quite far, but then she recovers quickly and catches Becky without breaking a sweat. All the damage Yor takes from this are a few scratches and a bloody nose. The bloody nose is also pretty damn mild. It's safe to say that Yor is tough, but how tough is she? We need to figure out the speed of the car. The biggest roadblock, get it? I'll myself, don't worry. The biggest roadblock in our way is the scaling of this scene. This is a pretty frequent problem when trying to math out these anime moments. The only really clear point of reference we have in this scene is Yor herself, and so we're going to use her height as our reference point. In particular, we're going to use her calves. In this frame here, we have a very flat view of the car hitting Yor, and her calf is pretty straight and pretty direct against the car. This is going to be our most accurate reference point in order to math out the rest of the details we need to estimate the speed of the car. Yor is 5'7", but that doesn't really tell us her calf length. After all, bodies are different. Two people of the exact same height could have very different body proportions, so we're going to need to find a nice frame where Yor is standing flat and straight up where we can get a nice reference point to measure her calf length. For this, we're actually going to use this figurine I found on Amazon. Yes, I could have scoured the whole anime for a scene that has the reference point I'm looking for, but I'm not doing that. This figurine is going to work just fine. I slapped that photo into Photoshop and used the ruler tool to run some pixel measurements, and in the end I found that Yor's calf is about 13.8 inches long. Using this, I can then get some measurement scales onto the car, and then I can estimate the speed of the car using that. I won't bore you too much with the exact math and numbers here, but I'm at least going to go over my methodology with you. Using Yor's calf length and the frame I mentioned before, I was able to figure out the size and length of the car's tire. Then, using some frames from this scene here, I was able to use the car's tire as a reference point to estimate the total distance that the car traveled. Because the scaling of the car changes literally frame to frame in this scene, I ran the measurements on 3 substantially different frames from this scene, estimated the distance, and then took the average of that distance to be as fair as possible. The final steps were very easy. I just took the distance I estimated and the time it took the car to travel that distance in order to estimate the car's speed. I only ran the numbers on the short clip where we see the car moving because that was going to give us the most fair and accurate number. In the end, it takes the car 1.61 seconds to move around 532 inches. This means that our car is moving at a speed of 18.78 miles an hour, or just over 30 kilometers an hour. That's honestly not that fast. Shout out to this guy for going slow in a residential area. It's just too bad that Yor wasn't paying attention herself. So, Yor is able to take a hit from a car going 20 miles per hour and get up like nothing happened. I looked into car accidents and the effects they can have on pedestrians when pedestrians are hit, and I think this information can help us better understand Yor's durability here. This article, by the way, all the sources I sourced information from are going to be linked in the description below, including this one, goes over London statistics on pedestrian accidents. The main goal of the article is to point out how a 20-mile-per-hour speed restriction can really help save lives, but they also mention a statistic that can help us understand Yor's accident a little bit better. 15% of pedestrians are killed when they're hit by a car going 20 miles an hour. There's a lot of nuance in that we just can't apply to this situation, but at the bare minimum, this definitely shows that Yor is durable. She's able to take a hit that would kill 15% of people and get up like nothing happened. I also think that my speed estimate for the car is actually quite conservative here. When we actually see Yor get hit by the car, the metal in the front of the car crumples, and it also sends Yor flying quite far and quite fast. I'm sure you could use a different methodology and use Yor and the distance she flies in order to figure out the car's speed, but we explicitly see the car driving right before the collision, so I felt like my methodology was the most fair way to go about it without pumping up numbers. These numbers might not be the most impressive we've ever seen, but regardless of that, it does prove that Yor is quite durable. That's all the exploration into Yor's superhuman abilities I have for you today, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, then subscribe and check out my How Superhuman is Toji Fushiguro video next. I'll be back in a few weeks with a video on Luffy and his feats of strength in the East Blue Saga, so be ready for that. If you have any characters from anime or other pieces of media that you'd like me to take a look at, put it in the comments. I need more video ideas. Also, thanks to all the support I received on my Toji Fushiguro video, I was able to become a YouTube partner. That means that if you'd like to, you can become a channel member and support my work. I'm not really sure what I'll do with memberships in the future. I'll definitely do something, just not sure yet. But that's an option for you if you'd like to more directly support my work. That being said, any and all support given on my videos is greatly appreciated. Whether you just watched one video, watched a couple and subscribed, hit that like button, or even became a member, thank you. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Have a good one.
Don't you worry, it'll be okay. Don't you worry.